yeah, that was just a season of really looking inward and figuring out, okay, like what defines who I am? Who am I? God, who do you say that I am? And am I going to trust that you're my provider over my career? Like, we should.
Welcome to The Brave Place, where we journey into the lives of brave men and women who have beat the odds or who are in the trenches right now. Difference makers who have truly discovered the warrior that lives within and are living it out. This is the place that will inspire, encourage, enlighten, and challenge that brave person that lives deep down within all of us. Welcome back to The Brave Place. I'm your host, Christy Rodriguez, and I am here with a very special guest. I am so pumped up. Colton Dixon, welcome to The Brave Place.
Thanks for having me. It's
Absolutely.
Gonna be so fun.
Yeah. Is this your first time hanging out in Arkansas?
I've hung out in Arkansas before, but here with you guys, I think it might be my first time at studio.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time out to hang out and share with us parts of your story.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
Okay.
Happy to do it.
Well, Colton, you have come a long way in the sense of, people first saw you in the country, right? Through American Idol.
Right. And
that might be people's first thought of you, but I don't think that's their first thought of you anymore.
Yeah, it's wild. It's been 10 years since American Idol, which I don't know how to process that. I feel old. That's how I process that. Like it's such a big part of my story and how I started. There's still some people who they'll see me on the side of the street and they're like, oh my gosh, you're that guy. Totally voted for you back
from
in the
American
day.
Idol.
Yeah. And other people, they know the music because you guys play the music. Thank you, by the way.
Yeah.
But they've connected with the song.
Yeah.
And that's played a big part in their story. So it's really cool to hear that as well.
I first saw you. I remember watching you on American Idol 10 years ago.
Did you vote?
I didn't vote.
Well, thanks
I'm
for
sorry.
your honesty.
I was too lazy to get off the couch, but I loved watching the show, and you were phenomenal. I mean, you were a top 10, 6th, 7th?
Seventh, yeah.
Okay, which is amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Man, it was such a fun run.
Yeah. And so for me, it's really cool to have you in here. But I think even cooler than that is the message that you're spreading across the world. And your music is making such an impact. I mean, nominated several Dove Awards. You've got your hit singles. Miracle is one of my favorites. I was jamming out to that earlier today. And then your most recent one, Build a Boat.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about Build a Boat. I mean, it's a powerful song. You're an amazing songwriter. Your lyrics are very moving and impactful. And so tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. It's about the story of Noah. What I love about this story is how simple it is in the Bible. I think Hollywood gets it wrong so often that there's this big struggle between God and Noah. But the Bible depicts it really beautifully. It's that God asked Noah to build an ark and Noah was obedient, period. So I read that after having seen Evan Almighty and all these depictions, and you see this huge back and forth of Noah or Evan not wanting to do this, right? But here's this simple and beautiful depiction. I thought, I want to be like Noah. When God asked me to do something that might seem crazy in my situation or in my circumstances, I serve a supernatural God. So my job is to step out and to have faith. If we want to see the miracle, that is what is required. Right. Whether it's Peter stepping out of the boat or Noah constructing this ark in the middle of a drought, God asked him to do something because he said something was coming. He's trying to get something to us. And I think that the reward far outweighs that step of faith that we have to take. So that's kind of what the song's about.
Wow, that's so good. Well, let me ask you, you were a part of writing that song.
Yeah.
So what inspired that in your own life? Do you feel like you have stepped out and done something kind of crazy that maybe you might normally not have done, but you just knew God was calling you to do it?
Yeah. Even just in my career, there have been many times where it's like, I don't know how this is going to shake out, but here we go. Because I know God's good and he's going to take care of us. In my career, was with the same label since American Idol. We did 3 records. The third record just didn't connect the way we had hoped and got dropped by that label. It was either end of 2018 or 19, maybe 18. And I thought that was it. I went through a couple weeks of not really knowing up from down. And my wife said something really good. She said, what if this isn't a setback, but what if this is God setting you up for what's next? And I think so often we put our identity in what we do, And I was no exception to that. My third record was called Identity, ironically enough. Should have known better. Doing a deep dive into all things, right? But it's funny. I write songs and I so often need to revisit the content of those songs to apply in my own life. But yeah, that was just a season of really looking inward and figuring out, okay, like what defines who I am? Who am I? God, who do you say that I am? And am I going to trust that you're my provider over my career? Like, we should, and then with 2020, I had a chance to put that into practice. Right.
I was about to say, like, what about 2020 for you? Like COVID hitting, was there panic? Like, first of all, your labels dropped you. Sure. Now you've got COVID. I mean, how were you dealing with all of that?
It's funny because I kind of walked through a similar season. It wasn't quite as long or drawn out as the COVID season was, but going through that process of having a label drop me, not knowing if music was in the future, but feeling like God was still calling me to this and having to step out and push through regardless of how I felt, or even I think the biggest thing for me, I don't love talking about the Enneagram. I'm a 3, so I care way too much about what people think of me,
Yeah.
But even just knowing that people knew that I'm no longer with a label and putting so much of my security and identity in that and stepping out anyway and continuing to do what I knew to do was right was tough on me. But doing it anyway, I'm so glad that I did because it worked out and with a new label and all those things. But I walked through that season pre-COVID and I wrote a bunch of songs from my experience in that season for everyone else's experience as they were just beginning this journey of losing jobs and losing identity and everything was halted. So there's nothing else to do but to assess your life and where you are. And I'm thankful that I was in that place, able to speak into other people's lives. It's wild. Everything is very much on purpose. His timing's on purpose, and it's perfect. Yeah.
Well, I just love the advice your wife gave you.
Me too.
I mean, just
found a good woman.
Yeah. Like maybe this is just the next step of what God has for you, basically. Yeah. So what would you say if you had to describe that, like coming into that next phase where, okay, God's got something better here?
The thing that I had a hard time understanding and maybe realizing was God is always wanting to do a new thing in us. Like it says, his mercies are new every morning, but that's not just looking at the bad things and turning the page and going, okay, today's a new day. Let's do a new thing. It's like, no, that even means the good things. I, for several years, rode on the coattails of Idol and the momentum and the wave of that. And before I knew it, that wave had taken me all the way to shore and I had forgotten to turn around and paddle back out to catch another wave. And I think that if we don't come up for air and ask God, like, hey, like what's the new thing? Like, I'm going to enjoy this. Thank you for this, but never want to be so attached to it or grip it so tightly that when that thing fades, it hurts, right? If we have this posture of open hands, things can come in and come out and you're not affected by it, good or bad, right? It doesn't define who you are. And had to learn that the hard way during that season.
Well, and speaking to that, I definitely think just in your line of work, you really do have to know who you are. If you're going to survive. Yeah. Right. And not be, fall into so many of the world's traps. Yep. And so I did want to ask you about that. You being a Christian artist, I mean, there's temptation everywhere for all of us anyway. Sure. But then you're also in this elevated position in a sense, and from world standards, where you're traveling everywhere, you're meeting tons of people. There's temptations everywhere. How have you been tested in that way? How have you navigated that?
Yeah. For me, the biggest thing has been believing the hype, and that's good or bad. My dad, in maybe a different way, kind of taught us just don't put your faith in what other people say about you. So I took that into don't believe the hype, good or bad. You have to be in a really good place and just kind of do it for entertainment purposes if you want to read comments on anything, right? They can all be great comments, right? But you start to believe them, right? And you start to think that you are an elevated human being, and that's really dangerous. I married the best woman on the face of the earth. She keeps my feet on the ground. Does a great job at it. And but it can be a tricky thing. Like it just kind of all boils back to, am I putting my identity in who people say that I am, or am I putting my identity in who God says that I am? And there's I think one is arrogance and one is confidence, right? There's a big difference.
Yeah.
Walking boldly, not boasting in anything that I've done, but what God has done in me and in my story. And that is beautiful to me. Whenever I see that on someone else, I recognize it, and it just, I'm like, man, I want more of that. Like just a confident human being, not in any gifting or anything that they have, but they're just like, man, look what God's done in my life. Newer guy on the scene. His name's Ben Fuller. Like I was so taken
awesome.
by that.
Yeah.
He did a couple shows with us last year, and he came off stage and just wept. It was like one of his first shows that he did. And I wept with him. I'm like, man, whatever is happening here is beautiful. So it's so important. So to not lose that. Yeah.
Well, everything you're saying is so wise, and I appreciate it so much. I think you're absolutely right. And it's God doing through us. We give him the glory for what he's doing.
Yeah.
But to keep that mindset, I mean, we're human.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Do you have accountability group? Do you have anybody that you talk to?
Yeah. Yeah. More on a practical side. It's so important to be in the Word, and we don't go based on what we feel like doing. If we did, I would be an obese human being. I would be, I still have to watch when my metabolism catches up. I might be in trouble. But like, we just don't do everything that we feel like doing, right? Because it's not good for us. But even in those days where I don't feel like spending time with God, I'm human. There are days where I don't feel like cracking open my Bible or opening the Bible app or going through a Devo. And I don't every day, I'll be honest with you. But on the days where I think, oh, I need to do this, I just do it regardless if I feel like it or not. Because like I said, God is always wanting to do a new thing, and it can come from spending 5 minutes from him. I think he's really gracious with our time. We serve a really gracious God, and he just wants to be a part of it. Whatever your life looks like, he wants to be a part of it, and he wants you to make him a part of that. It's a relationship, and I've learned that even growing up, grew up in church, and at times it felt religious, and like there's a set of things that I had to do and not do. And I've just learned that, like, man, whatever it is, even if it's a struggle, just bring it to God. He wants to be included in that too. It's just making those things non-negotiables in your life. Whether it's like brushing your teeth, hopefully that's a non-negotiable in your life, or, whatever. Like, just include it with that. Going, okay, today, if I don't accomplish anything else, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be better for it. And you will be 100%.
Well, to me, that viewpoint is looking at God not as a genie on the shelf that you pull down whenever you feel like it, but as a need. Like when you connect it with brushing your teeth, that's a need that we need to do if we want to stay healthy and be okay, right? And I think it's the same way. So I appreciate that analogy. Now, talking about your wife, let's go there for a minute. Yeah. So you met her where? Tell me about that.
Yeah, of course. We met in California. I just come off of American Idol. We were kind of stationed out there rehearsing for the tour that would ensue, after that show.
Were you looking for a wife?
No. I actually felt so strong during that season that I was not supposed to date. I was just like, there was so much going on. I was so busy. It would have been unfair to both parties, had I tried to do that. But I met her, and it was literally just like the light bulb went off. And I was like, wow. We started talking, and kind of asked her what she wanted to do. She had no idea who I was, by the way, which is just really refreshing at the time. And she said that she wanted to do ministry. She wanted to travel. She was helping with worship at a church out there, at the time.
Wow. Does she sing?
She does. Okay. She's got just the sweetest voice of an angel. It's just one of those really soft, airy, beautiful voices. It's just, it's amazing. I'm trying to get her to do more of it. But yes, it was like God was handing her over on a silver platter. Like, what more could you want? Yeah. She's also just drop dead gorgeous. Yeah. So all of the boxes, I'm like, there's nothing else on my list. Yeah. This is amazing. But like I said, I felt like I did not need a date. So we would text back and forth occasionally. She came out and saw one of the shows in Texas, actually. it wasn't until the last night of the tour, we had a layover in LA before I went back home to Nashville, Tennessee. Asked her if she was there, if she wanted to go out and grab a milkshake at like a classic diner in LA. We did. That was our first date. And I think 4 years later, we were married.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. On the first date, did you know?
It was pretty close. If it wasn't the first date, it was definitely within the first month.
Yeah.
I think she would say the same thing too. I just knew you just have peace about certain things or certain people. And
sure.
And I definitely was interested in Annie, but I just had this, I don't even know really how to articulate it. It's just this overwhelming supernatural peace about her. And whenever I thought about the future, I just started imagining it with her. And that's kind of like, okay, this is either really creepy or this is from God. It's one of those things that maybe it's best to keep it to yourself until he tells the other person.
Yeah.
But we started dating and it was pretty obvious where it was headed, but we were long distance the whole 4 years. So that's why it took us a little longer to make the jump, but I'm glad we did.
Well, how has marriage grown you?
Oh man, someone told me once that if you want to do more for the kingdom, stay single. And if you want to look more like Jesus, get married.
Oh, wow.
And it is dead on, man, because when you get married to someone like-minded, you're going to sharpen each other.
Yeah.
Right. And that pruning season and that sharpening season it doesn't tickle. I'll put it that way.
Oh yeah.
It can be painful and uncomfortable, but you are better because of it. So she shows me things about myself that I wouldn't have seen otherwise, and vice versa. So marriage was a reality check of, wow, I'm a selfish dude, and I want to do things my way, and now I'm having to lay that aside. I should be doing that, realizing that. It's every day is an opportunity to kind of lay that down and serve your spouse. You just pray that they're doing the same thing. Wow.
No kidding. Well,
yeah.
I've always thought if you want to learn how selfish you are, get married.
Oh, 1,000%.
I mean, that'll reveal your issues pretty quickly.
Yeah. And if you want to put a magnifying glass on that, have kids.
And I wanted to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
So you got two twins,
yes.
or one set of twins, two beautiful little girls.
Not two sets of twins.
They're going to, right. Well, and they're going to be two, right?
Yes,
Coming up this month. They just turned two. Okay, so they just turned two.
Yeah, we just had a party for them, and two girls. Their names are Athens and Dior, and we're millennials, so we went for it. Man, having kids, like I said, it just kind of puts a magnifying glass on that already like pruning and sharpening season that you were in. There are some days where, it's my wife and I, and we're in the thick of it. And, I have the thoughts like, are we going to get to do what we want to do ever again? It's like, it can be difficult, but at the same time, there's nothing I wouldn't do for them. And I think even just how it's affected my relationship with God. One of ours had kind of a rocky start and spent a week in the NICU. I just remember walking up and holding her little hand, or she was holding on to my pinky actually. And just having this thought, there's nothing I wouldn't do for her. And just kind of that gentle Holy Spirit tug is like, I feel the same about you. It's like, just undone, right there in the NICU. Yeah, my relationship with the Lord has definitely gone deeper since having kids. Yeah. You hear that growing. I grew up in church. Yeah. And I feel like I've heard that a lot. Yeah. But you don't fully understand until they're right there and you have that thought.
Yeah, I think for me, my own son, I look at him and I've had the same revelation. Okay, this is what God means when he says, I love you no matter what. Yeah. Like, I feel like my kid could do anything. Yeah. I mean, he could, I don't know, go burn the building or a whole neighborhood. I'd be like, I love you. But you know what I'm saying? Like, nothing changes that.
Yeah. That decision was dumb, but I love you.
Yeah, that was stupid. But you're still awesome in my heart forever.
That's right.
And yeah, for sure. And I know that God wired us that way just so that we would understand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you love about being a dad?
Everything. Even like the ugly stuff. Like there's there have been some diapers. But like,
do you change the diapers?
I did more so at first. Yeah. But then I think my wife was kind of like, I've got diapers from now on. If you want to do the bottles. And I didn't realize my time would be more taken up by doing the bottles. But man, I'll be happy when we're out of the bottle season. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, but then they won't need bottles anymore. So it's we're trying to cherish every season as it comes. But they're to a point now to where even in their own language, they're starting to have conversations with us, and they're wanting to tell us about stuff, and they get excited. And I wish I would have thought to film when I walked through the door just a couple weeks ago. It was like what you would think a dad being away for a week and then coming back. They were just so excited, just screaming, like stomping, dancing around. And it was just joy's the only word.
Yeah.
But being a dad is my favorite thing in the world. Apart from what I do for a living, my wife being a husband, there's just something so special about being their dad. I love it.
What do they call you?
I'm Dada.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm Dada.
Like the first time you heard that, what did that feel like?
I wept like a little girl. Just, man, I could cry thinking about it. Aww. It was just the sweetest thing. One of them called me Colton the other day. I don't know how I feel about that. My wife was like, hey, what's Dad's other name? And they go, Colton. And I'm just like, that felt weird. You know, like, it's really cute. That felt weird. Dad's good, sweetheart.
Aw, well, that's adorable. Yeah. Now, are they in Nashville hanging out at the house?
They're actually in Tulsa. So we saw them earlier today.
Okay.
Yeah, I stayed with them last night. We started this whole journey in Kansas City. So we've been making our rounds and got to see the fam on a work trip, which never happens. So that was really cool.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah. In-laws are there in Tulsa. So.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And let me ask you this. Where do you see yourself 10 years from now?
Every time that I feel like I make a plan, I feel like God's plan is so much better. So I've it's not that I don't make plans. I just don't hold on to them very tight. So in 10 years, like, where would I love to be? It's like, well, yeah, I would love to be selling out arenas and you know, I would still love to be doing this because I really believe in what I do. And I just love people, love reaching people. And especially people outside the church. I just have a heart for those people because they need Jesus too, you know?
Yeah.
So that's where I would hope to be. Would love to have my family on the road with me, you know?
Yeah.
But what God has in store, I have no idea. So I just try to stay open and time away that's where God shows you things and he reveals things to you. And so I try to do as much of that as I can. Yeah.
What do you love about Christian radio? I mean, why Christian radio?
Yeah. I grew up listening to Christian radio. So I love it. I know the impact of it because it's impacted me growing up. It's wild. Just the timing, you know, I would turn on the radio, would need to hear a specific thing, and lo and behold, someone's written a song about it. And that was the song that was playing at that time. I don't think that's coincidence. But I'm thankful to now be on the other side of radio, getting to be a part of someone else's story. You know, even just getting to play shows for people, seeing the power of radio right there in front of you. Like, you know, the radio songs because they're singing them, which is wild, blows my mind. But we have a front row seat in what God is doing in their life in that exact moment with that song. And it's so beautiful. But that's what you guys do, right? You're feeding people spiritually. Yeah.
That's so good. Well, what would you say to our listeners as we wrap up? Let's say they're just going through a trying time right now.
Yeah.
And they just need a word of encouragement from Colton Dixon, which I would call you an evangelist, honestly. Like, you're an artist / evangelist. I've seen you in concert. I've seen you just speak to the crowd, and you're an amazing voice box for the Lord, not just singing, but with your words. You're just a powerful communicator. And I just want to know what you would say to our listeners right now who are struggling. They're in a pit.
Yeah.
And they just need maybe a word of hope.
Yeah. I think we all would raise our hands if we were asked if we wanted to see a miracle in our lives, right? We would want to experience that. Even if you're not like struggling in the moment, you're like, yeah, well, I want to see a miracle. But what we don't think about is you would need to be in a place to need a miracle, right? And sometimes that means You're in the valley. Maybe you were on the hilltop. You were looking out. View was great, but now you're in the grind, in the thick of it, and you can't see the end. That's where faith comes in. If we could see it, it wouldn't be faith. Just don't give up. Like Noah building an ark. It was a drought, like not a cloud in the sky, right? But he felt like he needed to build a boat. And don't give up just before the miracle happens. That would be my advice.
Oh, that's so good. And I don't know about you, but today I'm 43. I've lived a little. I've still got a lot left. But I feel like today, for the first time in a long time, I'm grateful for the valleys, because I know this is where my faith is going to be tested and it's going to grow.
Yep.
And I'm going to experience God the most. That's where it happens, is in the valleys.
That's exactly right.
And so I appreciate, that's a good word. And just thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Man, thank you for just great conversation.
Yeah.
So great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, you're a blessing, and not just through your music, but through your words too. Just your songwriting, and then whenever you're on stage, and then interviews like this. So we're grateful for you. If anybody wants to find you, Colton, how can they do that?
Website's really difficult to remember. It's coltondixon.com. That's got all the social media.
Okay, let me write that down. Hold on. Time out. All right.
Yep.
coltondixon.com. Thank you so much for joining us again for another episode of The Brave Place. If you have any questions or you have any ideas of anybody you want us to interview here, you can email me, Christy@thebraveplace.org or Christy@klrc.com. Christy spelled CHRISTY. And until then, have a brave day.
Thanks for listening to The Brave Place, part of the KLRC Podcast Network.